On the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah learns about seasonal plantings in the walled garden of the famous Biltmore estate in North Carolina. Roger uses oils to paint a mountain view of the gardens and conservatory.
Hi, I'm so glad you could join us here in Asheville, North Carolina at the Biltmore Estate. We're in one of their beautiful gardens, and we'll learn more about that later. But now I want to find out how Roger's going to put all of this on canvas.
Well, usually I do a plein air painting, but today this is such a special subject. I thought I would do a studio painting a little bit larger than what I usually do. And I like this subject because it has so much color, has so much variety. We have the trees in the background, which gives us a nice change of values with the darks, the lights, and we also have the mountains in the background. So I'm looking forward to doing this piece.
Well, I'm glad you've chosen a large canvas because there's a lot to get in it.
Sure is. Well, back here in the studio, I have a 20 by 30 inch linen stretch canvas. I'll be using oil paints today. And on my tabouret, I always lay things out in an efficient manner so I can easily grab what colors I need. That way, when I need an extra tube of paint, I know right where to reach for it. And here I have my paints on my palette. Since this is an involved painting, I'm going to do this stage by stage as best I can to show you the process. I could sketch this in charcoal, but I think just with a brush will work just fine. This is where I really try and take care of the composition, because if I don't have the composition where I want it, this is the time to change it. So now the next stage is to keep refining this drawing, and especially get the proportions right on this conservatory. Well, now I have my drawing pretty much in place, and as you can see, I made a lot of changes here just a few minutes ago. I just wiped things out just to get them in place accurately with the reference photograph. So now my next step is to refine this and block in the large areas. Got lots of colors out here. I'm just going to mix a dark color. I'll start right back here. These look like evergreen trees of some sort back here. I'm using these paints kind of thin, but I'm not putting a lot of thinner with them, just a touch, because if I get them too thin and too soupy, then they're not going to dry nearly as well. I mean, they will dry eventually, but I don't want to get too much thinner on there to begin with. Well, while I'm up there, why don't I put in that blue mountain? And it's very light because it's in the far distance. Now, if I continue with my darks, I'm just going to move down the canvas. Right here we have the conservatory. Beautiful building. I'm not sure it really matters what areas I work on next here. The main thing is I don't want to fuss with any one area for a long time until I get everything covered on the canvas. But this is basically about values at this point. Right down in this area, we have a lot of red plants. I'm going to put in a dark, a very warm value down here. Now this is going to get lighter as I paint, but I want to paint the darks in first, and then I'll put some of these lights over this. This is just underpainting is what it is. And this trellis also is very dark. And this is sort of a complicated part of this painting, so what I have to do is really study it as best I can and simplify it. That's often a tricky part of any painting, is knowing what to put in and knowing what to leave out. So I've got some of these posts and things in here. Really what I need to do is just sort of block all that out for right now. And this really just plans this out. I'm going to put a few people in here. And as you can see, I'm not applying very much paint here. I'm just laying this in kind of lightly. Okay, this really starts to establish an overall pattern to the piece that hopefully is pleasing. Now right in here we have a lot of flowers, but I don't want to paint the flowers first. I want to paint sort of what's within those flowers, what's behind the flowers, which is the darker green colors of the leaves. So I'm going to take a sort of a dark green color again and just put this in as a dark value. So this is just sort of the base coat. This is what the flowers are going to go on top of. And since I'm working with oils here, at some point I'll have to put this aside and let it dry for a while before I go back. If I were to put these reddish flowers on top of the painting right now, I could do that, but I would have to have them fairly thick, and if I were to try and blend them or do any kind of brush work at all, they would mix with this green and give me a muddy color. I want this to be a nice vibrant color up here, so I'll just put this green on here for now, and we'll let that set up. Well, I'm starting to get this blocked in. Here we've got the glass part of the conservatory. These are all small glass panes up here, but we just blocked them in as one solid large area. And right at the top of the conservatory, we have another area of windows right there. Back here, we have another bed of these red flowers. But in this case, I won't be seeing much of the green there. As things go in the distance, they sort of flatten out. So as I look at those flowers there in the distance, I don't see much of this dark greenery because all those flowers are so packed together tightly in the distance there that you don't see any green between the plants. So this part of the flowers, this will just be a sort of a solid color. All right, now what I need to do is start refining this and start building up with my lighter tones. So let's go up here to the sky. I'll clean off my palette some just with my razor blade so I can have a new little work area there. So we had a very blue sky and very light. Okay, so as I look at this, I can tell this is too dark compared with the sky. So I'll start to lighten things. This is where I start to make all these adjustments. And so it goes through the entire painting. And I'll finish this sky right here. I'll keep building up this color of the sky. Get this dark green again. These trees here seem very warm, so I'm adding some red to this green. Now I have to be careful when I take this and flip it out into that sky because both those areas are very wet. So I can't do much blending. I just have to take that, flip it out, and once this brush starts to get some background color of this sky in here, I'll have to wipe that off and begin again. Otherwise that white sky, the light colored sky, will start to mix with this green and make it lighter, and I'll end up with a light color rather than this dark color back here. So I'm trying to make every brush stroke count when I do this here. I don't want to do a lot of blending. We'll mix some of the sky color and we'll tip in a few negative areas right here in these trees. Now let's move over to this trellis. And since I applied this fairly thin, it's certainly not dry, but it's tacked up slightly. And now I can go over that. This area here, though, I'll have to let dry longer before we apply those flowers. Okay, this trellis is very dark, so I'm going to mix up a color with some ultramarine blue and burnt umber and just start applying a few details in here. And I'm going to try and keep these fairly loose. There's just really no way I can put in all the details of this trellis because it's quite complicated, quite complex. And frankly, I just don't need all those details in order to create this painting. Often a simplified version of something is a bit more enjoyable and more powerful to look at than something with lots and lots of detail. Now, if I were there in person, I could get a much better grasp on what all these posts and things were doing. But dealing with a two-dimensional photograph, it does make it more difficult because I can't really move around and see what's in back of the first layer of this. In other words, the front and the back there. We've got two different things going on, two different sets of poles. But when you take a photograph, it sort of puts those all together, and it's very difficult to distinguish what goes where. Fortunately, this is all quite dark in here. And a suggestion of it, I think, will work. Here we get some nice ovals here. And they go all the way down here on each post. And even those, I don't think we'll have to put all of them, just suggest one or two. What I try and do is pick out certain recognizable features. And one of those would be this arch. So I'll try and get that arch in fairly accurately. Now what's happening here is we have a lot of the garden from the other side of the trellis sort of peeking through all this lattice work and so on. So with some negative areas, just like I would do in these tree trunks and things, I'll just touch in a few negative areas here and there just to suggest that transparency. With the warm tone of some yellow ochre and white, we've got some sunlight coming right across the top of this arbor, and that light might pick itself up somewhere throughout the trellis as well. So maybe down here there's a bench on the other side. We'll just pick a few areas right here where maybe that sunlight is also in evidence. Of course, this is backlit. The sunlight is coming from the other side. It's lighting some of this walkway here, so let's put in a bit of sunlight there. And then we have the walkway coming out here. It comes down. I'm going to lighten this. Now I'm to the point where I'm just starting to adjust these values where I have nice darks, good middle tones, and some real nice highlights to accentuate things. Now we have the grapevines that are all over this trellis. So with some light green, very light green, I'm just going to tap in a few leaves up here. Now this is pretty thick paint I'm using here, and one reason I'm using it thick is so it won't mix with any of the paint underneath. If it were any thinner, it would probably mix with this darker color, and I wouldn't maintain this nice, bright, light color look. Now on this side, this is all in shadow, and we'll mix some darker greens and put in some of these grapevines down here. Now hopefully by doing this, this trellis is going to end up looking like the trellis it is, but in a very simplified sort of way that will still describe it nicely, but without adding every little detail. And that's sometimes the difficult part of a painting, is knowing what to leave out, trying to figure out what to leave out. It's always easy to put more things in, but it's often difficult to know what to appropriately leave out. Right on this side of the trellis, we have some more sunlight, really hitting that area quite hard. So with some thick paint, put in a little bit of that grass over there, and maybe just a touch here and there showing through the trellis. Now what I want to do with these flowers up here is make them that beautiful red color. Now, as I said earlier, these here, I'm not going to see too much of the leaves. This is going to be kind of a flat area of just flowers. And those flowers go down quite a ways, so I'll just add a few touches of that same color, just peeking through the trellis here and there. Well, that really simplifies this trellis quite a bit without adding very much to it. but it really gets the point across in a very simple way, and that's what I was trying to do. Now, since this is still slightly wet, if I were to put those bright color flowers on there, my colors would mix with these colors and make sort of a muddy mess, which I don't want to happen. So I'm going to let this dry for a while, maybe a day or so. We'll come back to it and we'll finish it with these flowers. In the meantime, let's join Sarah back at the Biltmore.
Welcome to the Biltmore Walled Garden. This is Travis Murray, and he's the production leader of the crew here that changes out the plants. And if you look in the background, you'll see just how magnificent and large the garden is. Is it 4 acres?
It is 4 acres, yes ma'am.
And how do you figure out your seasonal plantings?
It really takes a lot of years of practice. So I've been lucky to be involved with this garden for going on 12 years now. So you kind of get into a routine about what plants work, what plants will tolerate a frost, and go from there.
Are you changing over for fall now?
We are. We're pulling out our summer displays. As you see, we have a few plants left, and then we'll be transferring over to chrysanthemums.
I've seen a lot of people hard at work. Earlier, I was walking through the arbor and I could smell grapes. And I noticed that, indeed, you have some growing there.
We do, yeah. That's one of the original structures as far as the brick foundation that is original to the walled garden. The wood has obviously been replaced. And we try to stick with 4 grape varieties that were on the original plan. So it's the 4 rivers, Delaware, Niagara, Catawba, and Concord that we grow on there. So we try to have that homage to that original historical intention.
And it was the famous landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, that designed this garden. It sounds like you have a lot of respect for him and the way the garden was laid out.
Absolutely. He was definitely people refer to him as the grandfather of, landscape architecture. He designed this garden to be a garden of utility. But Vanderbilt himself, what we have here is a result of Vanderbilt. He wanted a garden of ornament and not of utility. So we kind of have, over the years, paid tribute where we can to Olmsted and his original design, but we're able to do things like our seasonal change-outs because of Vanderbilt's influence.
I see, so that's kind of a nice way that it has evolved over the years, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
And I can't believe how the public can just come in and walk everywhere and enjoy it.
I hope they are enjoying it, yeah.
Well, it's hard not to enjoy it here. It's super magnificent. If you look down towards the end of the garden, you'll see a conservatory. And I think that might be a hothouse?
It is, yeah. Each of those sections in the conservatory has different kind of themed areas based on nighttime temperatures. So we actually have a hot house and a cool house, and that's all based on its nighttime temperature needs.
Originally, did they grow flowers in there and start their plantings in there?
They did. They had it more tropical, but they actually used to grow a lot of herbs and as well a lot of roses for rose cuttings for the house.
Yes, I'll bet they had some lovely floral bouquets.
I'm sure they did.
That was probably the job of several people, to fill the home with beautiful flowers.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for talking to me. I'm going to go down there and take a look.
I took a gentle stroll through the grape arbor, and the climb down the stairs prepared me, as the great landscape architect knew it would, for entering the very special structure. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt as though I'd entered an exotic, protected world, complete with a beautifully shaped glass ceiling.
Oh my, how lovely. So many colors. Look at these tiny ones. Very tropical, very nice. I'll bet the Vanderbilts came out here in the winter and just pretended they were in the tropics. Maybe even had a tea party out here to enjoy the beauty. Well, I know we're in the orchid house. Look at this color.
The butterflies and the bees love it here too.
Here's a little delicate one. This is the cool house. I'm not sure why it's called that, but maybe because there's some ferns and it's a little cooler than the hothouse. Bananas.
The time spent here has been very peaceful and uplifting. There were several places to sit and relax, and I hated to leave this well-tended garden. I look forward to coming back again.
Well, it's been about 24 hours or maybe a little more, and this is quite dry now. Some of these thicker areas up here are not quite dry, but down here we can start to work on these flowers, put in these flower beds. These flowers right down here are sort of a pale orange color, quite light, so I'm going to add some white to that. And just with the side of my brush, I'm going to scumble in these flowers here in this flower bed. And the important part of this is that I'm letting some of this green show through. And that dark green underneath there will indicate all those leaves and foliage underneath these flowers. So that's why it was very important to put in these greens first. I want to do this with a light touch because I don't want to cover up all those greens. Now when I put these flowers on, the paint I'm using here is a lot thicker than what I applied underneath. Now as I look at this bed of flowers here, I can see that the color and the value I put over here is not quite right. This needs to be more intense. It's about the right value, I think, but it needs to be more intense. So just a touch or two, we'll add a little more color right in there, just to make it look like it's the same type of flowers there on both sides. All right, let's move up to this next bed of flowers here. I think these are coleus. Now I didn't have much green in here because these coleus, the leaves are all a warm color to begin with, so there's no really green leaves on that. So I'm just going to make this more intense here. And with this same technique, we'll just use the edge of my brush. I'm just sort of scraping it along the edge of my brush. I'm not working this way, although I could, but this seems to apply it in a nice way, a nice easy way to get all that paint on there and still let some of this darker color show through. You can see how important it was to have these areas dark to begin with. It would be very difficult to add these dark areas over those lighter areas. It just wouldn't look right. All right, this bank of flowers right here in the foreground. I've got my dark greens. Now I want to put some lighter greens because there are lots of leaves between these flowers up here. So I'll take a green color and we'll just add some more green foliage here. Now here in this foreground, this is where you start to get more detail. Things become more clear. There's more clarity in this area. I've got some leaves down here. Now we can put in some of those yellow flowers. Now this is really where I start using my brush, not on its side like this, but I start using it more towards the tip of the brush. Lay that brush on and pick it up. I don't want to drag that brush around very much because it will mix with this green that I have on here. And of course some of these flowers will be in some shadow from other flowers, which will make them darker. Since these yellow flowers are so much in the foreground, I'm going to make a few of them quite a bit larger. Let's go up to where the conservatory is because that's really a center of interest, so we'll add some more detail in that area. I'm going to mix a dark color here, and I've got a small pointed brush. And we'll just add a few touches here where these windows are. And I'll just make that arch right in there. That's a double arch. Now there's a lot of windows inside those big panels. I'm not sure I can indicate all those, nor do I think I want to indicate all of them. It would be too much detail in comparison with the rest of the painting. But I think I could add some light coming through those windows, and maybe I can indicate some of those windows just by putting some of these negative areas in here. There, I think that describes it fairly well. And now we have all those window panes up here. Right now this sort of looks like a solid roof, but that's all glass. I can't put every single pane of glass in there, but I can start to indicate some of them. So I'm going to start from the middle here. These come straight down, and I'll probably be able to indicate a good many of them. I'm using this stick here just to steady my hand. Right up here at the top, there's a some nice decorative ironwork. Just goes right along the very top there. I'll just suggest that slightly. I'm going to take some pure white and just highlight a few of these window frames right down here where they touch the eave of the building. With my white, I'll just put that drip edge right there, right there. And with my burnt sienna, let's just highlight a couple areas right around this arch. I think that's all I need as far as detail goes to the conservatory. Let's finish this painting by adding a couple of people right in here. And by adding some people in here, we'll also give this painting some scale. And maybe a pair of blue pants. Just a few more touches to these people here. And a little bit of rim lighting right around her head. That should complete those. I think I'll add one more person in here, maybe a gardener back here. Then I'll consider this painting complete.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansimer, visit paintingandtravel.com.